Hello, everyone. Singapore is facing a real threat from Islamic ideology that could destroy national security and stability. What exactly is this threat, and how is Singapore responding to it? Let's first listen to the speech from Singapore's Prime Minister, Lawrence Wong. After that, we'll discuss it.
I'm calling this press conference in the middle of the campaign as Prime Minister because it concerns a matter of national interest. You will have seen MHA's press statement last night. As Prime Minister, I cannot emphasize this enough. Singapore's greatest strength is our unity across race and religion. It is the bedrock of our multiracial and multi-religious society. And this is not accidental. It is the result of painstaking hard work and patient effort by generations of Singaporeans. In the past few days, we have detected online activity by foreign actors urging Singaporeans to vote along religious lines. They say vote for so-and-so because he or she will better represent a particular race or religion. These foreigners targeted Singaporeans, and their social media posts were also widely shared within the Singaporean community. That crosses the line. Singaporeans may have different views about issues, but we cannot allow external actors to exploit whatever differences we may have to weaken us or to advance their own interests. Singapore's politics must be for Singaporeans alone to decide. And so we have blocked access to these posts. And we will continue to act firmly against any such actions. Foreign influence is one side of the coin. There are also other posts circulating online attempting to bring race and religion into politics. One example is a recent social media post by a Singaporean activist proposing that Muslims should vote for candidates that are willing to advance his religious agenda. These messages may be by Singaporeans, but we should also reject them. And were it a Christian, a Hindu or Buddhist group making the same demand, our response would be the same. Mixing politics with religion is unacceptable in Singapore. We have always taken a firm stance against this. First, it fractures the common space we share as Singaporeans. Second, once elections become contests of faith, all communities in our society will end up worse off. Third, external powers will seek to exploit these fault lines to advance their own agendas. And as we have already seen, these challenges and threats are very real. Now, this does not mean that we cannot engage and address the needs of our different communities or even talk about race and religion. I myself make a point to engage these different communities. I know it's harder for our minority groups, as it is in any multiracial society, and I'm grateful for their efforts in upholding our social compact in Singapore. The engagements I do help the government to better understand the concerns and needs of our diverse communities so that we can address concerns and issues in a way that expands our common ground and strengthens our society. But such engagements are very different from identity politics, which we should firmly reject. What is identity politics? Identity politics means candidates and MPs appealing for support on the basis of race or religion and championing the interests of that particular group over other groups and over everything else. That's dangerous because when one group jostles aggressively to assert its identity, others will organize and start to jostle back. And you can see how this plays out in countries everywhere. You end up fueling our worst tendencies, hostilities, and vengefulness across society. No one wins when this happens. The minority groups will fail to get what they want because the majority group will push back strongly and the minorities will find their space constricted. At the same time, the majority group will also live in the most unhappy society where every issue comes down to race and religion. So no one is happy, no one wins. And in the end, we will be more divided than before. And Singaporeans, all of us, will pay the price. So I call on all political parties to make their positions clear on this matter. This is not a partisan or party matter. This is a matter of national importance. In particular, I invite the leaders of all political parties to make their stand clear, not just on foreign interference, but on two fundamental principles. First, that identity politics has no place in Singapore. Second, that we should never mix religion and politics. At the end of the day, whatever our differences, we are all Singaporeans first and foremost. I thank Singaporeans of all races and religions for having supported this multiracial and multi-religious approach all this while, which has enabled us to build a successful and harmonious Singapore. I am confident that even now, the majority of Singaporeans across all racial groups support this approach. I ask Singaporeans to continue doing so. Then we can protect this oasis of peace and sustain our exceptional harmony for many more years to come.
So we've just listened together to Prime Minister Lawrence Wong's speech. Here's what's happening. Singapore is currently facing a rise in identity politics based on religion, particularly from Islamist groups, both foreign and domestic. This is not just a difference of opinion. It has escalated into campaigns urging voters to choose leaders based on religion, specifically Islam. Why is this dangerous? Because when religion becomes the basis for choosing leaders, democracy, which should be rational and inclusive, turns into something exclusive and sectarian. In Singapore's context, which is highly multiracial and multi-religious, this is like lighting a match in a room full of gasoline. The Singapore government recognizes this as a very serious threat. If the Muslim community, though a minority but large and well organized, starts mobilizing voters in the name of Islam, then other communities, such as Chinese, Indian, or Christian groups, may feel compelled to respond in kind. Eventually, elections would no longer be contests of ideas, but covert religious battles. This isn't just theory. We can see the real-life example in Indonesia, their neighboring country. In 2017, Basuki Cahayapurnama, also known as Ahok, a Christian of Chinese descent, became a victim of Islamic identity politics. He was falsely accused of blasphemy against Islam for quoting a verse from the Quran. The context clearly wasn't offensive, but pressure from radical Islamic groups who mobilized masses using religious sentiment led to Ahok's defeat in the election and ultimately his imprisonment. That event is proof that Islamic identity politics can destroy justice, common sense, and even the law, simply due to pressure from militant religious majorities. Singapore does not want to go down that path, because if left unchecked, society will fracture along religious lines. Election decisions will be based on religious loyalty, not competence or integrity. Religious groups will begin to distrust one another and weaponize politics for their own gain. Foreign actors, like transnational Islamist networks, could exploit the situation to expand their influence. This is why Prime Minister Lawrence Wong took a firm stance to reject all forms of religious-based identity politics, even when it comes from Singaporeans themselves. And he specifically denounced calls to vote for Muslim candidates who support an Islamic agenda. In conclusion, Singapore is extremely alert to the threat of political Islam because they've learned from the experiences of other countries, including Indonesia. They understand that once religion enters politics, stability and peace will collapse. And when society starts hating each other because of religious differences, no one wins. Everyone suffers. So, is the threat of Islamic ideology truly real? Or is Prime Minister Lawrence Wong simply Islamophobic? That's an important question, and it needs to be answered clearly. First, Let's separate Islam as a personal faith peacefully practiced by millions from Islam as a political ideology that seeks to impose religious law in public and governmental spaces. What the Singapore government is rejecting is not the presence of Muslims, nor their freedom to worship. The problem arises when religious belief becomes a political tool, when religion is used as the main criterion for choosing leaders, creating laws, or deciding who is and isn't fit to govern. This is not phobia. This is reality. Open your eyes and look. Many countries that were once peaceful are now in ruins because of Islamic identity politics. Look at Lebanon. Look at Pakistan. Look at Syria. Even in Muslim-majority countries like Indonesia, we've seen how Islamic ideology can be used to oust leaders of different faiths, just like what happened to Ahok. Ahok was not corrupt, he was firm and brought many positive changes. But because he was Christian and dared to talk about the Quran, he was accused of blasphemy and sent to jail. Is that democracy? Is that justice? So when Singapore's prime minister firmly states that religious identity must stay out of politics, it's not irrational fear. It's anticipation of a pattern that has already proven destructive elsewhere. Political Islam is not just a matter of majority versus minority. The problem begins when the ideology claims that only Islamic law is legitimate, only Muslim leaders are acceptable, and anyone who disagrees is an enemy of the faith. At that point, the state is no longer founded on equal citizenship, but becomes a religious state. And we all know, once a country is run by a religious interpretation, minorities are oppressed, freedom is eroded, and the law turns into a weapon for religious enforcement. So the answer is clear. This isn't about Islamophobia. This is about protecting pluralism, democracy, and national stability from an ideology that seeks to replace it with religious supremacy. So what could happen if Islamic identity politics is allowed to continue growing in Singapore? Could such a small country end up in civil war? The answer is yes, and it could happen faster than we imagine. Singapore is a small country, both in terms of land and population, but precisely because of its small size, its social fragility is more sensitive. This nation is built upon a very delicate yet strong social contract. All races and religions must coexist peacefully, without anyone imposing their identity in the public sphere. Once this principle is violated, tensions can erupt quickly. Why? Because Singapore is not a homogeneous country. About 3/5 of the population are ethnic Chinese, followed by the Malay Muslim community, Indians, and other minorities. If the Malay Muslim community begins to be encouraged to vote only for Muslim leaders who defend Islam, then other communities will feel threatened, and their response could be swift. They too will begin voting based on race and religion. What happens then? Democracy turns into a sectarian competition. Elections are no longer about policy, but about who defends my religion. And if that happens in Singapore, a densely populated country with no geographic buffer zones and an economy heavily reliant on stability, social clashes could very quickly escalate into a national crisis. Could it lead to civil war? Maybe not on a large scale, but bloody sectarian riots are a very real possibility. One mosque being stoned, one church being burned, that's all it takes. In a single night, decades of interfaith trust could collapse. And don't forget, Singapore is highly dependent on foreign investment and its reputation as a stable country. One spark of religious conflict could cause investors to flee, the economy to plummet, and international confidence to vanish. So yes, in the context of a small but highly diverse nation like Singapore, Islamic identity politics is not just a threat, it could become an existential disaster. But why are there still people who continue to push Islamic identity politics? Do they really not care about Singapore's stability? Or are they just unable to think that far? This question hits at the core of the issue. The answer isn't simple, but it's not complicated either. First, we must acknowledge that within Islamic teachings, there are indeed elements that fuel identity politics. In many traditional interpretations, Islam is not just a private faith, but a complete system for governing society, from law, governance, and economy, all the way to determining who is fit to lead. For instance, there's a hadith popular among many Muslims: the leader must be from among the Muslims, or the concept of Amar Maruf Nahi Munkar, which is sometimes interpreted as a duty to impose religious law upon society. And don't forget the principle of al-wala wal-bara, loyalty to fellow Muslims and disavowal of non-Muslims. These are not fringe views, but teachings that are preached in many Islamic schools and sermons today. So it's understandable that some Muslims, when entering the political realm, carry with them this religious logic. For them, choosing a leader is not about vision or integrity, but about faith and how much that candidate can defend Islam. Are they aware of the consequences? Some don't care because they believe the ultimate goal is to uphold Islam, not to maintain pluralism. In their minds, national stability is not a priority because their primary loyalty lies with God's law, not man-made law. Others may simply be unaware of the great dangers they're helping to sow. They follow charismatic preachers or religious figures without thinking critically. And this is the danger. Once religious fanaticism is unleashed into society, it's very hard to control. People can no longer be reasoned with because all they hear is one message. This is God's command. Period. So yes, some push this agenda knowingly, while others do so out of ignorance. But the outcome is the same, the fracture of the foundations of peaceful coexistence. And in a small country like Singapore, such a mistake could bring destruction faster than we think. So what lies ahead? Will Singapore succeed in resisting the threat of political Islam, or will it fall like other larger countries before it? The short answer, Singapore has a strong chance to succeed, but it cannot afford even a moment of complacency. First, Singapore has systemic advantages. The country is firm. Laws are enforced without bias. Anyone who tries to bring religion into politics is promptly warned or even blocked, just as the government has done with recent provocative posts online. Second, Singapore does not shy away from defending secular principles. They are not afraid of being labeled Islamophobic, when what they are doing is keeping the public sphere neutral from religious interpretation. They know that once they retreat due to religious pressure, that boundary will keep getting pushed until it collapses. But on the other hand, we also have to be realistic. This threat won't disappear just through press statements or social media bans. Because political Islam is not just a foreign movement, it also grows from within, from citizens who begin to feel that Muslims should have a bigger voice, or that Muslim leaders are more trustworthy. If this ideological virus takes root in the hearts of the younger generation, through social media, online sermons, or dawah that prioritizes Islamic identity over national unity, then the challenges ahead will be far greater. And let's not forget, this ideology doesn't need a majority to do damage. Just one or two public figures with a mass following, just one or two leaders playing the religious sentiment card, just one election filled with sectarian rhetoric, and Singapore's stability could be shaken to the core. So what does the future of Singapore look like? If the government remains vigilant and the people continue to uphold national unity above religious identity, then Singapore could become a shining example of how to reject political Islam elegantly and peacefully. But if the people begin to fall for the propaganda of defending religion and turn a blind eye to the dangers of sectarianism, even a nation this small could collapse from within, without a single shot being fired. So, what can other countries learn from Singapore's case? And what lessons should Muslims themselves take from Singapore's firm stance? First of all, other countries, especially those still hesitant to act against the politicization of religion, should learn one key thing from Singapore: that firmness is not discrimination. Being firm against divisive ideologies is actually a form of justice, ensuring that all communities remain safe. Singapore doesn't wait until riots or killings break out. They act swiftly when the early signs appear, whether from foreign sources or from their own citizens. They don't care if the perpetrator is Muslim, Christian, Hindu, or anyone else. If they begin to inject religion into politics, action is taken. Other countries, especially those with a history of sectarian conflict, be it Indonesia, India, Nigeria, or even some European nations, need to stop being afraid of being labeled intolerant simply for defending secularism. In fact, by allowing identity politics to grow, they are paving the way for prolonged conflict. And what lessons should Muslims themselves learn? Simple. Learn to live peacefully in a pluralistic society. Don't assume that because Islam is the majority religion or considered the most true, its followers are entitled to special treatment in politics. Don't bring exclusive doctrines into a public space that should be inclusive. Singapore offers a tough but fair lesson. If Muslims want to be respected and accepted, then they must also be willing to share the public space with others without imposing their will. They need to understand the difference between freedom of religion and freedom to use religion as a political tool. If Muslims can grasp this, they will be respected. But if they continue to try to govern the country in the name of faith, then in the end, what will happen is not the triumph of religion, but a total rejection of it. And one last thing, living side by side in peace is far more noble than gaining power by dividing people. So friends, from everything we've discussed today, one thing we must remember, maintaining peace and harmony is far harder than provoking and dividing. But that's exactly why peace is the most precious thing we have. Singapore shows us that if a country and its people are firm from the beginning, even the smallest threats can be stopped before they become disasters. And for Muslims, this is also a moment of reflection. Will religion be a source of shared goodness? Or just a tool for narrow political ambition? The choice is yours. If you feel this video opened your mind, don't forget to click like and share it with your friends. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think our country has the courage to be as firm as Singapore? And do you see similar warning signs around us? Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss other sharp and honest content. See you in the next video. And as always, keep thinking critically and don't let anyone fool you with scripture.